We're all defined by our accent. People have a general idea of where we are from, how we grew up, our ethnicity, our national origin, based on how we talk. And our accent defines who we are in society. We are perceived differently based on our accent. The groups or clubs that we are able to get into, our entry into those depends on our accent, who our friends are, and the types of jobs we can or cannot do depend on our accent. Everybody has an accent. Even people that we see on TV, on the news, have an accent. So the question is, how is it that accent, prejudice, and discrimination are prohibiting people who speak excellent English from getting jobs? So if they speak English better than, if somebody from a different country knows English and speaks it better than a native English speaker but has an accent, they still are discriminated against from getting jobs. Are there jobs that require a defined accent norm? So what I'm talking about with this is jobs like a police dispatcher, where it requires the person to be able to be understood by all people. There has to be a norm that's decided on, and the question I have is, what is that norm and who decides it? And then how far, if there is a norm, how far can a person's accent deviate from that norm to still be able to be able to do the job? In this job, for like a police dispatcher, there's a safety issue involved with this job, so it, to an extent, makes sense that there should be a norm involved, and for the police officers to understand what they're saying. But what is that norm, and how is that quantified? How do they decide whose accent goes too far from that norm to qualify for that job? So I recently read an article on accent discrimination. The article is called Voices of America, Accent, Antidiscrimination Law, and a Jurisprudence for the Last Reconstruction. The article speaks to the law and its failure to protect people from being discriminated against based on their accents, protect people who have been denied jobs. The article is written by Mari J. Matsuda, who is an associate professor of law at University of Hawaii. The article includes several narratives based on people in Hawaii who have been denied a job based on their accent. They took the people took the company to court because they felt they were being discriminated against, but the overall theme of the article is that the court always sides with the employer, not the person who was discriminated against. And I think that's because there isn't a law specifically in place that protects people from accent discrimination. So the legal issue, as stated by Matsuda, is courts recognize that discrimination against accent can function as the equivalent of prohibited national origin discrimination. The fact that communication is an important element of job performance, however, tends to trump this prohibition against discrimination, such that it is impossible to explain when or why plaintiffs will ever win accent cases. So that goes back to, we're defined by our accents. People can listen to people speak and they can either assume where they're from or know where they're from based on their accent, even if they're speaking perfect English. So you can say it's discrimination against national origin when someone is not given a job because of their accent, because their accent is defined by their national origin and ethnicity and their place in society. One of the stories, or part of the explanation of the stories, is that some accents are derived from a lower class in society, and those people of lower class are the people of the lower class in society are discriminated against and thought of as less than the upper class, and the upper class have the power to keep them from getting certain jobs. So the author of the article is a law professor at the University of Hawaii, and she tells the stories of these Hawaiians who have been discriminated against because of their accents. Hawaii is known to be an accent cornucopia. There's people from all over the world that live in Hawaii. And Matsuda lists the variety of voices heard on the islands as Hawaiian, Portuguese, New England English, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, and Spanish. At some point in time, some of these different language groups came together. There was a language developed in Hawaii. It started out as a kind of a mixture, and it developed into an actual language with all the same rules applied in all other languages. So the story that I will speak about is a story about Manuel Fragante, who was a very intelligent, hardworking, honorable, and respectful, who was a combat veteran of 2 wars in the Philippines. He was respectful, a leader, and he was Filipino. He speaks three native Filipino languages and English. In the Philippines, English is taught in most schools. He has a university degree in law, and he served in the military for most of his life in the Filipino Army, and he volunteered in the United States Army. So he moved to Hawaii. He applied for a job at DMV. And he was denied the job even though he was highly qualified and spoke excellent English. He was, in many years in the military, he was rated on his English proficiency as excellent. He was denied the job because of his accent. The Filipino accent, some of the people in Hawaii say they can't understand people if they speak in that accent, even though the customer population at DMV in Hawaii is extremely diverse with many different languages spoken. And he was still unable to get the job because his accent prohibited him from being understood by the majority customer. So when we see job descriptions, there's always a note stating that the employer is an equal opportunity employer. They don't discriminate based on race, gender, national origin, etc. So my thought was, wouldn't you assume the accent would be an obvious job category under race, ethnicity, and national origin? Somewhere within those 3 categories it should fit in. So why is it not protected, and how is somebody discriminated against getting a job based on their accent? there should be a law in place so that people like Manuel are not denied employment because of their accent. And there should be a norm in place. And the question is, who decides that norm? What jobs require the norm? Is it based on a safety factor, like I was saying before? Because working in the DMV and issuing licenses, tags for cars, dog tags, is not a safety issue. He can speak English, excellent English. He just has an accent, as do many of the customers that come in. So the overall idea of the article is that there needs to be some sort of a law put in place that protects people from being discriminated against based on their accent. And currently there is not a law, and currently people who are denied jobs based on their accent are unable to win in the legal process when they try to prove that they were discriminated against. And when it actually is proven that they were discriminated against, they are still unable to win in those cases.